Hello, and welcome to the Within podcast. Thanks for joining us again today. I'm here with co-hosts Heidi and Allie, and we are excited to talk about today's topic all about culture. So, Allie, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I think, a lot of the work that we do with clients, whether it's fractional HR work or employee experience or, thinking about well-being differently, I think at the very heart of all of that is the culture of your organization. And if you don't know the culture of your organization, it's really, really, really hard to, do the things that make your employees want to stay and want to be engaged and want to do the work that you want them to do in a way that you want them to do it. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time today talking about culture, really, I would say in three different buckets, kind of from the bucket of like your employees, but also like, what do you do if you're a large organization and, you've got all these employees you got to figure out how do you make happy? And then you also from a small employer perspective, I think those are sort of the things that keep a lot of leaders and owners of businesses up at night is, how do you keep your people? Because hiring people, we know hiring people and the cost of turnover is very high. So how do we make sure that we're really thinking about that culture aspect? And culture really does, I would say, 5 things for your organization. It helps you help the employee experience in a day-to-day place, right? So your culture changes. Your culture changes as your people come and go. We also know that identifies gaps in that leadership. So a lot of times you will bring leaders on board that have been really great salespeople, and then you make them a leader, and then you're like, oh my gosh, why are they not doing as well as they did in a sales role? We also know that psychological safety, whether you like that word or not, it is very important in every organization that you've got that trust factor and that safety where employees can show up as their authentic self. That's something that kills teams really, really fast if you don't have it. And then, of course, making sure that leaders have that, what do I need to do to lead to be successful in this organization? And last but not least, if it's not working, if your culture is not what you want, what do you do if, you need to change it or you feel like there's something that's, stopping you from having this amazing culture that you think you want? And many times it starts with you just think your culture is one thing. And if I went and asked your people, they would tell me something completely different. So we want to talk about it from Nikki's point of view, which is like kind of that small business, that HR function. Heidi's going to pipe in and talk a little bit about how she worked in large organizations and that culture aspect there. And then we'll kind of wrap it all up and we'll talk about sort of the meaning of, how does culture just impact the broader success of your organization? So Nikki, can you talk a little bit about that kind of that smaller fractional HR and what you do from a culture standpoint there and how we support that?
Yeah, I can. But before we do that, as you're talking, I'm like, okay, I feel like we need to even go like a little deeper here. So like you just named off 5 things that go into culture. When people come to us, like, what do you feel like is the number one thing when people say culture? That's kind of a buzzword, right? Like what do you think people usually are talking about when they talk about culture? Or
well, a lot of times people think culture. Yeah, a lot of times people think culture is like the environment. So like the building or the things that they offer or their benefits, like that's what they think culture is. But culture is really a feeling. Culture is the feeling that an employee has when they walk in your building, right? So the building's not the culture, it's the feeling that you have. And if your leaders are mindful of that feeling, it doesn't have to be in a building. It could be on a call. It could be anywhere. When we're out visiting a client or, so it's not necessarily a thing. It's really a feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I mean, I feel like a lot of people always are talking about, oh, our culture is this and our culture is that. And it's like, okay, what are you talking about when you say culture? So I've never heard you explain it like that, like with those, kind of all of those components, and it makes sense. So anyway.
Yeah. No, the other thing I would add, and Heidi, I think you have a lot of experience in this too. So pipe in here. It's also about making sure that your purpose, your vision, and your values are aligned. And I think that's also something that kind of gets people a little bit wonky is that, you have a purpose and it might be words on a wall that people should know, but yet then when you actually dig in, it's like, wait, that's not actually how this company shows up for me as an employee.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So from a small, as you're talking to, I'm thinking through like some of the scenarios that have been going on. So I do a lot more work on like the actual HR fractional HR side. So, how are we? Do we have rules? Do we have policies? Do we have communication around those? Do people know if they're showing up for a holiday? Like what is going on? And I think um, the listening sessions have been that's something Allie kind of introduced me the formal term to this year, and it's been interesting, especially in a small business. I think people like to think, oh, we're all, small business family. We all know each other. All the things are happening. And you start like opening a door to, to ask questions to an employee, and the information that you get on how they feel or like what's going on or why they're upset about something. It's like, oh my gosh, like you're just showing up every day and having a smile on your face because you guys are so close. You are close knit team.
Yeah.
The average size of client I work with is 15 to probably like 200 or so, and especially in those smaller ones, it's kind of crazy like how much is going on under the surface that the employer or the leader, whether that's the owner, whether it's an operator, like just doesn't understand. So it's kind of interesting when you talk about, and in one particular that I'm thinking of, they have a brand new building. It's so beautiful and all of the things. And there's kind of all of these things going on under the surface. And it's just because they're not communicating. So like when I think of like a good culture in a small business, and I think what I see time and time again is, they make assumptions. Like I think we're all in our head of, oh, they want more money, or oh, they want more this, or they want more whatever, because you hear little snippets of things. And I think a lot of times like the bandwidth of an owner or operator that's doing all of the things and trying to make everybody happy because they don't want people to leave, because they're usually running so lean. They make assumptions on what people want, and then they take action because they don't have time to ask the questions. And I
Yeah.
think that's what's been fun, honestly, and something kind of unexpected for me the last year is to take the time to actually go in and talk to these people and, hey, what's going well, what's not going well. Some of them have no systems, some of them have like no communication. So it's just like really turning over those rocks of like, hey, what's here, what do we have, how are we communicating, so that you feel like you can be effective in your job. And I think a lot of times it's something completely different than what the leader or the owner thought, right? So
Yeah.
like they actually don't want 10,000 more dollars. They just want you to tell them if they need to be there on a certain day or if they can go volunteer at this event, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's just, I that's probably like the biggest thing I see when I talk about culture. I think a lot of small businesses have a good culture because they are so close knit.
Well, yeah.
But I do think when it comes to like their jobs and like I think a lot of small businesses also don't realize the importance of like, what do I actually do? Like, what are my core functions and what are my, how am I held accountable, or like, what does that look like? I think a lot of small businesses, again, they maybe get started because a leader had left an organization or went out to do their thing that they love to do and made it into, a business, and they don't always know how to they don't want to be like micromanaged, I think is a big thing that I hear a lot in the small businesses. Oh, well, like I had to, and I did this, right? Like I did this when I was running the agency. And like a lot of this is like making me reflect on my own experience. And it's like, um, but having those, having that handbook so people understand what's going on, and having the job description that they can refer back to so they kind of know what their core duties are when 10 things get put on their hat. That's not micromanaging. That's letting the person know what their expectations are and giving them kind of like a North Star to follow instead of being all over the place. So
Yeah.
I don't know if any of those nuggets help you, but they're very common things. And I mean, one of the companies I'm supporting right now, they're 100% on virtual. They've always been virtual.
Mm.
Um, and so when you say like, culture as a space, or, as a feeling versus like the actual space that you're in, they have an amazing culture. They're extremely flexible. They're able to do a lot of things, but that's because the leaders have that expectation, and that's kicked down, and communicated throughout the organization very well. So
Yeah. Heidi, are you, from your point of view and working with larger organizations, how do you feel culture is felt by the employee, and how do leaders play into that?
Quite honestly, it's not a whole lot different than the small business. It's just, if you think about it, sometimes small businesses is one team in a
Yeah.
larger organization, and so it's just at a grander scale. And what I love, at least with the organizations that I've worked with and doing some sort of culture assessment, is individually assessing each one of those leaders and getting their thoughts
Yeah.
on how they view those questions for the organization. And sometimes their view is just it may be as myopic as their team. But again, they're a leader, most likely on some sort of executive leadership
Mhm.
team. So they're part of that team in which those leaders are working together. And then bringing that information together collectively and having that conversation with those leaders together
Yeah.
after you've already assess them separately or individually and then bringing it all together. It's very eye-opening, and it's probably the best dialogue that an organization can have, because you just find out you have some leaders that are aligned and some
Mhm.
that disagree or agree to disagree, and you leave the conversation with just a different approach to how you want to continue to lead the organization and lead your team, but also what are the things that we want to work on, and make those decisions collectively as to what's best for the culture. Um, and again, they're doing those leaders are kind of doing it based on how what their feelings
Mhm.
Yeah.
are, and how they're led as well. Because there's ultimately someone that's making those decisions that may or may not be them. So it's a very powerful exercise, for lack of a
Mhm.
better term, and that leads to a very powerful conversation that I would hope that most organizations are doing on a regular basis, not just when we come in and help them, that one time, but instead doing it on a more frequent, whether it be annually, biannually, because like you said, things do change. The
Yeah.
Right.
culture changes based on the employees that are coming in, and sometimes those leaders that are even coming in. The change of leader can really change a culture. Um,
So, how often do you think is reasonable for employers, no matter what the size, to do some of these listening exercises or kind of assessments of how things are going?
Yeah. So
it's a
it's
Go
a
ahead,
good
Nikki.
question.
Yep.
Yeah. I would just say one thing before you get to like listening sessions is to do the assessment first. And the assessment is a quick, it should be a relatively quick, like 10-minute survey. If you're doing a culture assessment, you can do it two different ways. You can do an actual assessment for the whole organization. So it doesn't matter if you have 15 people or 15,000. Doing that culture assessment gives you a baseline to what your people think, and then you can do listening sessions with a smaller group. You can do leader listening sessions, or you can do employee listening sessions, and then bringing all those together gives you a really good picture of, if you think about your organization, whether it's your organization's identity, whether it's your leadership, whether it's your environment or your work-life balance, like those are the metrics that you can really say, can we shift the needle in our culture using the lens of those five things. So it's like the doing it every year, I think, is probably something we would recommend at a minimum, every 18 to 20 months. I think it's doing that, but it doesn't have to be the whole population. You could just do a segment of the population. And we've even done it where, teams are having issues. So it's
Mhm.
almost like doing like a team health exercise. So, you've got a specific team that is struggling because they have had high turnover on the team, or you've had, your leaders are leading in a different way than what their last leader had led
Right.
in. And so you could do something just specific for a small team too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that initial culture assessment really is pretty telling and eye-opening. And I know Allie kind of starts with, the five categories, and that's typically what I also had used in doing the cultural assessments, but it might morph out to other topics because you just find that an organization has either pain points or passion around something else that really just makes their culture different.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I have found in doing this, the cultural assessment and then the listening sessions, it really does lead more to what that true employee value proposition is. Because again, leaders might have set out saying this is what our employee value proposition is and trying to bring, to attract and retain talent, and come to find out it might be a little bit different as a result of these conversations.
Yeah.
It's
So what?
powerful.
Yeah. So for me and also for the listeners that might be listening, so I'm just again thinking of the business I'm working with, either have or am right now. Some of them, when I ask what their mission is, they like look at me sideways, like, "What are you even talking about?" And like I think they have one, right? Like I think one in particular I'm thinking of. It's like they all have like a goal. They've had a lot of growth. They're looking to continue to scale. So where do you start as an organization, big, small, whatever, if you don't really have a strong vision, mission, kind of all your values? Like where do you always suggest, or where would you suggest?
I mean, I would start with that, like identifying what is your and we like to use purpose over mission now. That's just a little more generational. I would say the generations are looking for what's your purpose versus your mission. Mission always feels a little more financial driven, where purpose feels a little more
Okay.
like, broader, and like purpose is like the Northern Star, right? Like you might not ever actually meet your purpose, but it's something you're striving for on an ongoing basis. So we recommend purpose. And if they don't have a purpose, that's where I would start, is identifying, what is your purpose and why do you show up every day? And that could be a small group where you've got some executive leaders and maybe a couple of key employees where you have them involved in a purpose exercise. I think that's really important, especially if you're hiring younger generations. Because
Yeah.
the younger generation wants to know, how are you making a community impact, not
Right.
just how are you being profitable. So if you don't have a purpose, and the crazy thing is, like at the end of the day, they have a purpose. They
Yeah.
just dare not know it.
That's
Right.
what
So
I'm like. Yeah, they're working towards something, and
Yeah.
everybody knows that. It's just like, how do you package that
For sure.
into something that people can identify with and understand, or like have a common goal. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's
it's got to be something that resonates, right? I
right.
mean, and I have been helping some small organizations as well, and I the whole intent, in my opinion, is that they're words, that come together to form a purpose, but that really people feel that they feel good about and they want to be part of. And sometimes people feel as though it's got to be a paragraph,
Oh yeah.
uh, and that just or, and it's got to be something that you see, so you're reminded of it, because I mean you have to feel it, but sometimes you have to see it to be reminded of it to continue to live it out. And so I think the shorter the better, the more concise. It's something that someone can rattle right off their tongue, as to the company's purpose, and then how their own individual purpose, it really aligns nicely then when you
Right.
start talking about individual purpose and how it aligns with the overall organization purpose, and that they feel that they're fulfilling both of them
Right.
Yeah.
with the work they're doing.
Yeah, for sure. I think that that is probably as important or equally important as your culture. And I think the purpose really sets the stage for what do you want your culture to be.
Right.
So yeah, I love it.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think culture is really an interesting topic that not a lot of organizations are really like spending time on. And at the end of the day, that's probably where they should be spending most of their time, is fulfilling their purpose through their culture. And but you have to have a leader that's willing to say, like, this is who we are and how we're going to show up. And not all leaders are willing to do that. And
Right.
it trickles down, right? So
And
I
I
just
think
think
that's in a small business, like I do see that, especially because
Yeah.
you're running so lean, like I said, and oh, we don't want to piss them off, or oh, we don't want, and it's like, what's the worst that happens if somebody leaves? Like if they weren't the right fit. And I truly believe in everything that I've seen over my career, but especially in the last 4 or 5 being an entrepreneur, is you have to be set up that if somebody leaves or goes in because it doesn't, they don't align, or maybe their purpose has changed. Like you have to be okay that people are going to leave your organization. So like you never want to get yourself in that spot that like if somebody leaves, it would be detrimental. Yeah. And if you are there, that's when I would 100% step back and start doing some of this.
Yeah. And I would say by doing it, having the cultural assessment, having the conversations, coming up with a purpose as you go out to bring people into your organization, they're looking more for a career than a job.
Right.
And that's a huge difference in just my, as I worked through my 30 plus years in the HR field, is finding people that want a career,
Yes.
not just come in to have a job. And just their mentality, how they approach their day is very different.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, well, we highly recommend culture assessment, understanding your people, purpose. We partner with Salveo Partners. Rosie Ward is an amazing leader and does great work in the culture space. So we partner with Rosie and have the ability to help you with a culture assessment if you ever need one. So thanks for joining us today with the Within podcast.